This video discusses the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, with 19 children and 2 teachers killed, and the Tops grocery store shooting in Buffalo, New York, with 10 killed, and the difficulties in stopping mass shootings in the United States. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. There have been 2 mass shootings within 10 days. On May 14, 2022, a mass shooting occurred at a Tops Friendly Markets store in Buffalo, New York, in which a white male, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, who described himself as a white supremacist, shot and killed 10 black people. Gendron surrendered to police and has been charged with first-degree murder. Then on May 24, 2022, another 18-year-old Salvador Ramos killed 19 small children, all around 10 years of age, and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, a town with a population of about 16,000. The tragedy of 19 children between the ages of 8 to 11 killed is very hard to fathom. Just imagine the investment of labor, love, time, money, and effort the parents must have made for 10 years in the life of their child, and then to have their hopes and dreams shattered. All that effort and sacrifice made worthless. I will discuss 2 issues related to the Uvalde school shooting: the less than desirable police response and the issue of gun control to put an end to mass shootings. First, the police response. Information available from the investigation so far indicates that the police did not respond to the threat for about 77 minutes from the time they arrived on the scene till they killed Ramos. Parents that came to the school immediately after hearing about the shooting fought with the police, urging them to go in. But the police did not engage the shooter for about an hour. The police response thus appears to have been either very shoddy or deliberately very shoddy. The reaction of parents whose children were killed appears to have been relatively subdued. They seem to have something to hide. What they have to hide is their basic attitude towards the United States. Many people who have come to the United States from Mexico and Central America feel that the United States, particularly Texas and California, are lands white Americans have stolen from Mexicans and it belongs to them. German masqueraders have fostered and encouraged this belief, urging them to fight to snatch back their land, quote unquote. These Mexicans and other Latin Americans consider whites in America to be their enemies. With so many such people being US citizens, no wonder drugs can enter almost freely into the United States, and they have been using threats against whites of non German ancestry, like the German masqueraders do, to control them. In hopes of taking control of the land for themselves by exterminating whites of non German ancestry, they've joined the German masquerader side. Law enforcement is rightly slow to respond on behalf of such people. That is the reason for the delayed police response to the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas. That's why 48-year-old Joe Garcia died having his quote unquote heart broken just 2 days after his wife Irma Garcia, a teacher at Robb Elementary School, was killed. Judging from the slow police response, the parents and relatives of the shooting victims suspecting that where the sympathies lie is now known to white Americans of non German ancestry was subdued in their reaction to the personal tragedy. Next, let's look at gun control to end mass shootings in the United States. Media around the world has, in no uncertain terms, pointed out to Americans the atrocious side of American exceptionalism. One has to be dense to miss the connection between almost totally free access to guns and mass shootings. They rightly cite the examples of other countries, how they responded to mass shootings and put an end to them. In the United Kingdom, after the Dunblane Primary School mass shooting, in which 16 children and 1 teacher were killed, stricter gun control laws were passed. As a result, only muzzle loading and historic handguns are legal, as well as certain sporting handguns. Britain ended mass shootings after the single massacre. The UK still has a problem with radicalization but has no mass shootings. The difference is access to guns. NBC quoted a former detective sergeant with London's Metropolitan Police as saying, "It's very difficult to get hold of a firearm in the United Kingdom. Legally, there are lots of checks and restrictions, and illegally, there are only so many in circulation. There are plenty of people out there who would, if they could get their hands on a firearm, probably use it, as opposed to what they do now, which is use knives to settle scores. If firearms were more readily available, these people would quite happily use them." That, in a nutshell, explains the continuing mass shootings in the United States. Reuters reported how gun laws were changed in other countries immediately after mass shootings. New Zealand. After the Christchurch mass shooting that killed 50 people in March 2019, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern banned the sale of assault weapons within days. Parliament later voted to bar the circulation of and use of most semi automatic firearms, parts that convert firearms into semi automatic firearms, magazines over a certain capacity, and some shotguns. There have been no mass shootings in New Zealand since then. In Australia, after a gunman killed 35 people at a cafe and tourist site in 1996, Australia banned all semi automatic rifles and all semi automatic and pump action shotguns. Thousands of unlicensed firearms were surrendered under a gun amnesty program, and licensed gun owners required to take a safety course. The chances of being murdered by a gun in Australia plunged to 0.15 per 100,000 people in 2014 from 0.54 per 100,000 people in 1996, a decline of 72%. Canada. In 2020, shortly after a gunman shot and killed 13 people in Portapique, Nova Scotia, Canada banned more than 1,500 models of assault style firearms and components and set limits on how destructive bullets could be. Canada's rate of firearm homicides is 0.5 per 100,000 people versus the United States rate of 4.12. Norway. After the 2011 bomb attack in Oslo and mass shooting in the island of Utøya that left 77 dead, Norway's already strict gun laws were further tightened. The country has had no mass shootings since then. In contrast, over 200 mass shootings nearly 216 mass shootings have been reported in the United States in 2022 so far. That's in just 5 months. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, the US is an extreme outlier among high income countries, with the number of children killed by guns in the United States being 36.5 times higher as compared to many other high income countries, including Austria, Australia, Sweden, and England. The entire world clearly sees American leadership largely to blame for not doing anything to control access to guns. A succinct description of what the world thinks of America was voiced by Isaiah the prophet in Isaiah 1 verses 5 to 6. "The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faints. From the sole of the foot even to the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed or bound up, or meaning cleaned or bandaged, or soothed with ointment." Isaiah continued in chapter 3, verse 12, "As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, those who lead you cause you to err and destroy the way of your paths." Yes, the world is saying whole of America is sick from the sole of the foot to the head, meaning the common people to the top leadership who can't enact and enforce common sense legislation to restrict access to guns and put an end to mass shootings. This is precisely how I thought 6 to 7 years ago. There should be no unregulated right to own military style weapons for every adult. The legal age for buying tobacco products in the United States is now 21 years, and yet an 18-year-old kid can buy high powered assault weapons with virtually no restrictions. Why can't 60 senators get together in a bipartisan way and pass legislation restricting access to assault, semi automatic, or automatic weapons? However, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. I had fallen into this trap like almost the entire world when considering gun control and mass shootings in America. Then, about 6 to 7 years ago, I had an epiphany. Do you think that American leaders who have created a nation that is the envy of the world and most people in the world want to flock to it, and current leaders still maintain it in a relatively enviable position to some degree or another, are so dense that they cannot see the connection between easy access to guns and mass shootings? Yes, they see the connection. But there are far more compelling reasons why they don't want to pass strict gun laws and deny access to firearms to much of the population. I am 100% with the Republicans on this issue. After humanity's incredible advances in means of transportation and communications, the world got a lot smaller. Knowledge increased tremendously, and it became possible to traverse the globe from one end to the other within 24 hours. News travels instantly all around the world. This has made it easier for the actions of a nation to have global impact very quickly. This was not so a few centuries back. That has helped Germany have global impact with its actions. After World War II, if one wants to look for the cause of violence anywhere on earth, one would not be wrong in assuming that in most cases Germany has had a hand in it directly or indirectly. Violence in America is no exception. In fact, Germany has used its hand most viciously for orchestrating violence in America, including gun violence. The reason is that German masqueraders have exploited the Second Amendment to the hilt. The Second Amendment reads, "A well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Now, for some perspective on gun ownership in the United States. US population is 334.6 million, and there are 260 million above age 18. According to www.americangunfacts.com, about 41% of adults live in a household with guns, and about 32% of Americans say they personally own a firearm, according to the 2021 National Firearms Survey. This means that more than 81.4 million Americans own guns. Gallup has this figure estimated at 44% of households, meaning 3% higher, or about uh, nearly 90 million. There are estimated to be over 400 million guns in the United States between police, the military, and American civilians. Over 393 million, meaning 98% of the total, of those guns are in civilian hands, the equivalent of 120 firearms per 100 citizens. The average gun owning American has 5 firearms, while nearly 22% of gun owners only have a single firearm. There were nearly 40 million guns purchased legally by Americans in 2020 alone, according to FBI records. This was higher than any other year on record so far. All firearm deaths in the United States for 2020 were 45,222, which works out to 13.7 deaths per 100,000 population. The kind of military grade weapons and body armor owned by Americans were on display during riots and protests that erupted in Ferguson, Missouri on the shooting death of a black man, Michael Brown, by a police officer in August 2014, and particularly in Kenosha, Wisconsin in August 2020 after the shooting of 29-year-old black man Jacob Blake that left him paralyzed. Of course, the federal government monitors such activities and had prepared the police forces by equipping them with armored vehicles usually used by the US military in combat operations during war. Many times I have spoken about exterminating all German masqueraders for the atrocities they have committed in the United States over the past 400 years, including 10 million people murdered in electric crematoriums or medically murdered. They have let me know a few times what they think about my statements. Each time they have said in my face, "We have guns now." What the world does not understand is that white Americans are not a monolithic group. America is two sub-countries in one. One sub-country consisting of German masqueraders who are people of German ancestry living in America and other white countries, and their allies, which includes almost all minorities, and the other subcategory consisting of other whites of non-German ancestry and a tiny few of their minority allies such as the Sikhs and most from Punjab state of India. German masqueraders in America and their minority allies are not idly boasting when they say we have guns now. They are armed to the teeth with military grade weapons and tons of ammunition and are prepared and ready for civil war. They displayed their weapons and body armor during the Black Lives Matter protests following the death of George Floyd by police in May 2020. And you will have noticed that many of them were black immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean who have also been training, who have also had training through the US military and law enforcement. What the world does not understand about America's gun culture is that there are two warring nations within America, deadly enemies of each other, ready to fight for total control of the country by exterminating the other. They are fully armed to the teeth for that fight. What the world does not understand is that getting rid of guns in America is not just a matter of making possession of assault style semi automatic or automatic weapons illegal and ordering the public to hand them over by paying compensation for them or confiscating them. Imagine the task of confiscating guns from 81.4 million or, uh, or 90 million people who are determined to hang on to them at all costs and stay ready to fight the looming civil war. There are a total of 900,000 law enforcement officers in the United States. Just imagine the odds of 900,000 armed police officers trying to confiscate guns from 81.4 to 90 million Americans who want to hang on to them at all costs. Just imagine the bloodbath of law enforcement officers it would lead to. What the world does not realize is that in America, it's not just a matter of making ownership of certain weapons illegal and the population will hand them over to the police. The public simply will not hand over their weapons and will kill police officers if they try to confiscate them by force. There will be full scale war on police. The US could call the Army and the National Guard in to help, but that situation is equally as complicated because both sides are equally well represented in the military and the National Guard. I tend to think that the German masquerader side may even have a numerical superiority in the military because they've been preparing for the civil war for at least the past 5 decades, and a key part of their strategy including controlling the US military. Therefore, if the military is called in to disarm the public because certain types of guns have been banned, most likely the military will start fighting within itself. Next question is, why doesn't the US leadership at least try banning assault weapons and see what happens? Maybe much of the law abiding public will choose to surrender their weapons. Unfortunately, that situation is equally as complicated. Lying, deception, disobeying, and disregarding the law is a way of life for the German masquerader side. They can drive a truck through any law. On the other hand, the other side is generally law abiding. If the government passes a law banning assault weapons, most of the law abiding non German masquerader side will surrender their weapons, whereas the German masquerader side will not. Therefore, banning assault weapons will result in one side being disarmed, whereas the other side will stay fully armed. Much of the Republican and some of the Democratic leadership understand that. That is why semi automatic and automatic lethal military grade weapons are not being banned in the United States. Politicians and leaders will keep talking, but no action can be taken to ban assault weapons. The non German masquerader side does not want to become sitting ducks for the German masquerader side. Whole of America from head to toe is not sick as far as the gun debate is concerned. Leaders keep talking, but they know they cannot and should not do much about it. Unfortunately, we are faced with a situation for which there are no easy solutions. I hope it is now clear to the world that there is a civil war brewing in the United States to take control of the entire country by the German masquerader side by exterminating the other side. It is part of the larger clandestine war waged by Germany almost since the end of World War II to dominate and rule the world. The war in Ukraine too has been orchestrated and instigated by Germany by using German masqueraders in Ukraine, whose current leader is President Zelensky of Ukraine, a die-hard Nazi masquerading as a Jew. Germany orchestrated the ouster of pro-Russia President Viktor Yanukovych in 2014 to be replaced by the Nazi Petro Poroshenko. President Putin of Russia was forced to act to annex Crimea to be able to better defend itself against a possible war with Germany and fight in Donbass to defend the ethnic Russian population there. Germany then used the regimes of the Nazi Poroshenko and Zelensky to develop biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine and was ready to install nuclear weapons there to be used against Russia. These acts by Germany in collaboration with German masqueraders in Ukraine posed an existential threat to Russia. President Putin had no choice but to act and lose no time in meeting this threat. Russia attacked Ukraine in February 2022. What is going on in America with gun violence is part of the larger clandestine global war being waged by Germany. Now, a brief history of that war in the United States. After unconditional surrender to end the Second World War, most Nazis went underground. A few of the top leaders were tried and executed. But the political situation in the United States, Britain, and Russia favored the Germans because German masqueraders, President Truman in the United States, Prime Minister Clement Attlee in the United Kingdom, and Stalin in Russia, all German masqueraders, were in control of the government in their respective countries. A mere 2 years after the war, Truman and Attlee left the task of denazifying Germany to the German government. Very soon, all the Nazis were back in power in Germany. With the masquerader Truman followed by the masquerader General Eisenhower as president, German masqueraders held top positions in the government and the military. They shared top military weapons secrets with the Germans. After the war, top German scientists brought to America headed or were near the top leaders in the space and nuclear weapons programs. They were able to pass on all these military secrets to Germany, who developed nuclear weapons and ICBM technology in China, as such weapons could not be developed on German soil because of occupation by the Allies and Russia. By the early 1960s, Germany had developed nuclear weapons and ICBMs in China, though the first test was conducted on October 16, 1964. They also made another major technical breakthrough, which was to develop the technology to deliver threats electronically directly into the ears of people. Germany passed on that technology to German masqueraders in the United States, who used it to the hilt to use threats to force people to do whatever they wanted. To demonstrate their ability to make good on their threats, they assassinated President John F. Kennedy. From that time on, masqueraders continued to gain strength. By 1969, they felt they were strong enough to commit major acts of violence, which started with the Charles Manson murders of actress Sharon Tate and four others in August 1969. However, law enforcement response was swift. Manson and his accomplices were arrested, tried, and jailed for life. German masqueraders in the United States realized that they could not resort to open violence and murder people. So they started murdering white Americans of non German ancestry clandestinely. Then they developed a strategy to control the US economy. Warren Buffett was already a successful investor. Masquerader leader Charlie Munger then moved to Omaha, Nebraska to be with Buffett, and both took over the national masquerader leadership in 1970, though Charlie Munger was already one before that. Then every means to clandestinely murder white Americans of non German ancestry were used, including medical murders, abortions, cremating people alive in electric crematoriums, poisoning in restaurants, serial killings, staging accidents, and mass shootings. These clandestine murders continued for a full 30 years before the existence of German masqueraders, and all their activities were fully discovered around 2000 to 2001. Though most of the clandestine murders stopped since 2000 2001, mass shootings have continued to be used to perpetuate violence in the United States. Unfortunately, as gun control is not possible, as already explained, America is going to continue to be plagued with mass shootings, though that does not mean nothing should be done to protect the public and school children as much as possible. Before we discuss what should be tried to protect the public, it's important to discuss the profiles of mass shooters and their motives. All mass shooters are not mentally ill as most analysts would have us believe. There are much more sinister forces at work, including spiritual forces, in the lives of the mass shooters. I would divide the mass shooters into four categories. Number one, demon influenced. Number two, motivated by a warped notion of patriotism. Number three, who perceive themselves to be losers. And four, actually mentally ill. So let's look at the first category, the demon influence. It's not a secret any longer that Satan is the god of the Germans, and he mimics everything the true God of the Bible does, meaning that he acts like a god. He is described as such in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verses 3 to 4. But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. The Germans worship Satan. The true God requires his worshippers to obey him. Satan requires the same. Therefore, Germans and German masqueraders obey Satan and his demons as they instruct them, who communicate with them through thoughts and clear instructions through their mind. They are in no doubt, that means the German masqueraders and the Germans are in no doubt, um, whatever whatsoever, when Satan or the demons have communicated with them, particularly when they provide clear instructions to them to do something, nearly everything with a sinister motive. When a loyal angel of God communicated with the prophets of old, it was considered a great honor by them. In the same way, when the demons communicate with any German or German masquerader, they deem it among the highest honors they can receive in their lives. When near 18-year-olds receive instructions from a demon to carry out a mass shootings, they deem it an honor. When they tell their parents that they heard these voices, their parents instruct them that it is an incredible honor and they should carry out the task assigned to them. They know that obeying Satan has been very profitable for them because they have grown rich by looting American and British wealth over the past nearly 7 decades using strategies suggested by him, that is Satan the devil. Into this category of mass shooters fall Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold of Columbine High School infamy, the 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida, the 2017 Sutherland Springs, Texas church shooter, 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly, then James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooter, and Gendron, the Buffalo, New York Tops Friendly Market store shooter. By far, most of the mass shooters belong to this category of the demon influence. It is also true that the lives of most of these mass shooters were going nowhere. It's easy for them to take the plunge. Their ethnic targets, such as black people or Jews, are just smoke screens, mere excuses concocted around white supremacy and other philosophies to quote unquote justify the shootings. Satan is a murderer, and one can expect the same from his followers. Crimes against these ethnic groups are designed to create hatred between them and the white people in their nations. Identifying such potential shooters through the use of red flag laws, which are explained later, and treating them for mental illness will not stop them. The reason is that they are not mentally ill. They take their orders from Satan and the demons, and there is no way for anyone to know when such instructions are conveyed. The second category of mass shooter is the one who has a warped notion of patriotism, who genuinely believes that the United States is being overrun by minorities out to take over his country. So he must do something about it to bring attention to the problem, usually by carrying out a mass shooting directed against minorities. An example of someone with a warped sense of patriotism was 21-year-old Patrick Wood Crusius, who carried out the August 3, 2019 mass shooting at a Walmart store in El Paso, Texas, United States. In that attack, 23 people were killed and 23 injured, all Latinos. The police believe that a manifesto with white nationalist and anti-immigrant themes was penned by Crusius, posted on an online message board 8 Jan shortly before the attack. The manifesto referenced the conspiracy theory called the Great Replacement and the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand. Though Crusius referenced the same literature as some who are demon influenced, who used to carry out a mass shooting, he was not demon influenced. He did it out of a false sense of patriotism. At that time, I delivered a message advising young people not to carry out such shootings because leaders of our side already have the situation, already know the situation, and have it under control. The third category is who perceive themselves as losers. Generally, the lives of most of the mass shooters in all categories are going nowhere. Some who perceive themselves to be losers don't make any serious effort to make something of their lives. They reach the conclusion that they have nothing to live for. They want to end their lives. They're very angry people too. Their philosophy is that they want to end their lives, but they want to take some people along with them. I know this category very well from personal experience. I've had some of the best education in the world in premier educational institutions in India and the United States. However, even by age 43, 44, I had no money to my name and had to borrow money from my brother sometimes and even my church just to pay my rent and monthly bills. On top of that, my church pastor was treating me like dirt and allowing others to treat me like dirt. He was trying to get me to leave the church. Many times the thought of ending it all came to my mind and somehow to take my church pastor, not church member, just the church pastor, and some other random people along with me. Incidentally, that church pastor had murdered another church member and was put to death long ago after his wicked deed was discovered. However, I was thoroughly grounded in my religious beliefs and did not dwell on such thoughts constantly to commit a mass shooting. But it describes a category of mass shooter who perceives himself to be a loser, is angry with the world and wants to end it all and take as many others along with him as he can. Salvador Ramos, the Robb Elementary School shooter, fell into this category. There are many such potential shooters, and easy access to guns for particularly angry ones leads them to commit mass shootings. However, my experience tells me that some of such potential shooters can be reached by right moral instruction, teaching them that success in life can come in many ways and can come late in life, and that raising a family is success in itself. And who knows whether they might raise a great child or grandchild who could lift the entire family out of poverty. All should be taught to have hope in the future. Such moral grounding may prevent some not to take the plunge and become a mass shooter. The fourth category is the mentally ill. Uh, there may be a gray area here between mental illness and a person who perceives himself to be a loser and possibly homeless and struggling just to live. But such persons will commit mass shootings if they have access to guns. I would think that the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooter, 20-year-old Adam Lanza, who shot and killed 26 people, including 20 children and 6 teachers, falls into this category. So, how does America deal with the problem of gun violence and mass shootings? Pundits say that mass shootings in America are a choice because we are not doing anything to curb access to assault and military grade weapons. But as I have already discussed, clearly gun control is not the answer, and lawmakers are not dumb and stupid that they will legislate banning guns to give a clean victory to the German masquerader side to allow them to easily exterminate us on the other side. But short of that, everything else should be tried to prevent mass shootings from taking place and succeeding. I'm not an expert on security issues, but there are some good proposals that should be looked into, such as raising the minimum age to buy guns to 21, placing armed law enforcement on campus in every school, hardening potential targets so that no one can get in ever except through one entrance, and keeping the door locked, using smart technologies such as installing man traps, which are a series of interlocking doors at school entrances, and red flag laws to deny access to guns to people with mental issues or taking away guns from such people. Yes, it is possible to take away guns from a few mentally ill and other at risk people, but disarming disarming 81.4 to 90 million people, just forget about it. It's not going to happen in America. In fact, Florida Representative Randy Fine raised some serious concerns this week with a threatening Twitter message directed at President Joe Biden. He wrote, "I have news for the embarrassment that claims to be our president. Try to take our guns and you'll learn why the Second Amendment was written in the first place." That is how many Americans feel about gun control. Moral instruction directed specifically at this problem may prevent someone from taking the plunge to commit a mass shooting. But with German masqueraders embedded in schools in large numbers, they simply will not allow moral instruction in schools. But if some school districts can succeed in allowing it, it's worth a try. Now, as I have described, in conclusion, the situation is not very hopeful in trying to put an end to mass shootings in America. The root cause of the problem is demon inspired German evil around the world. The Bible has succinctly described their evil traits and how they carry out their evil throughout the earth through Nahum the prophet and Nahum chapter 3, verses 1, 4, and 19, which state, "Woe to the bloody city." Now, God uses Nineveh here, the capital of the ancient Assyrians, ancestors of the modern Germans, to represent Germans today. Woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departs not. Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts. Now, witchcraft identifies their dealings with Satan and the demons. The mistress of witchcrafts that sells nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. For then, verse 19, "For upon whom has not your wickedness passed continually?" The German traits identified here are violence, bloodshed, and gore, lying and deception, robbing people, always victimizing some people or the other, that they deal with Satan and the demons, and virtually no nation escaping their evil continually. America and British Commonwealth nations and the Jews certainly have been the main targets of their wickedness, but we are not far from a showdown. A civil war is looming, which will decide the outcome of which side gets exterminated. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the videos. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the capability to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that capability. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.